Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a sort of last-minute sales pitch, I guess you will, for Unicorn Overlord here on the day before release here. So there's a comment I've seen come up a lot over the last few weeks. I wouldn't say it's an all-the-time thing, but it is a very persistent subsection of folks that I figured I would at least try to explain something to real quick, and that is specifically about the combat of Unicorn Overlord. See, oftentimes the kind of stuff that I'm seeing there is something to the tune of, well, whenever I'm going and looking at the combat, it's not necessarily for me by reason of the fact that it's quote unquote automated. So I wanted to explain what the merits are of the kind of automated system here, and how it may not be so different from other SRPGs that you've looked at before, and kind of how that is. So let's go ahead and get started on this thing. And first and foremost, let's go ahead and cover one misconception right away, and that you're supposed to do all of your predictions before the fight even starts, because you actually have a lot of control over your people and how they fight in the nitty-gritty right before you get into a fight. So not only can you change everyone's positions to basically determine who they're going to be facing, how they're going to be facing them, but you can go and swap out specific orders for telling them to go do specific things to specific people. It is going to be still squads of units going after each other, but you already know what order they're going to be acting in. You can vaguely predict who's going to be impacting who where, based on the health loss predictions there, and additionally, you know how many actions are available to everybody. This is both true for you and the enemy squad here. So this actually gives you a hell of a lot of control in terms of knowing, well, in terms of specifically giving orders to go attack specific units in specific ways. Like, for example, this guy's got a health recovery move that typically should ideally be used in situations when something's at low health, and I forgot to set that priority for him. But either way, all of your attacks can be given specific general priorities, and then once they get into an actual fight, like kind of by itself, that's when you can go and nitty-gritty stuff out. Like, these are 3 units that are going to be attacking in a line formation here. This is why I swapped that Griffin Knight to the back, and why they ended up taking less damage from this encounter here. Because they're attacking in a sweep, this means that they specifically have to target those 3 tiles at a time. So by going and splitting them up in 2 separate squads and combining in both a evasive unit and a shielding unit in the same line, this means that ideally one of them is going to be covering for another. I don't know for 100% certain that that's what's going to happen, but that's my prediction based on the information that I have. This gives you a whole lot of play in terms of deciding how to go into fights. And as you saw earlier, this isn't true simply, like, when you go into a fight, this isn't going to be a case where everything's already baked in. You actually have different situations depending on how much assistance you have. See, you saw with those assistance actions that every time that another assistance was triggered, sometimes it went up, sometimes it went down. While this is technically random, effectively what this means is that every time some support action, some outside influence, is getting involved in that fight, it's creating a situation where they're actually going and effectively re-rolling the fight for you. This means that through teamwork, you can effectively get around randomness. Through good positioning, you can get around not having the right counters for something by maybe stalling that fight for another day, maybe moving something out for another day. Suboptimal situations can be dealt with, as the situation demands, and this is a really fun type of strategy. So as I've said in previous videos, this is something that was really kind of Ogre Battle's bread and butter, but hasn't really been explored since, because it's not simply this formula is incredibly complex to pull off. See, because in most RPGs, it's a matter of balancing units against other units. Some have to be stronger, some have to counter other things, some have to be the tanks, the DPS, all of that kind of thing. In this particular case, it's also a situation that, just like many of the Ogre games, they're throwing something else in there. So, for example, we're actually considering time as a huge part of this. Time is a massive part of this particular formula, because the time that it takes somebody to get somewhere, the time that it takes them to recover, whether you have support to cover somebody while they recover, this is the kinds of stuff that you typically see more for tabletop wargame type situations, which is basically where the genre all originated from the first place. Funnily enough, this is a more a more actual realization of a lot of those ideas than many potentially realize. Where effectively back in the day before video games and whatever else, before even D&D, people still wanted to have chess but with way more pieces. So they would come up with complex rule books of like, okay, these guys have these kinds of armor classes over here, these pikemen counter these guys over here. We roll some dice to determine how many of their grape shots landed or whatever else. And eventually this got more and more complicated, starting off with just basic knights and soldiers and cavalry and all of that, with the old chainmail stuff. And eventually you had more complex stuff for different types of wars and scenarios and stuff popping up, until eventually D&D was like, what if we just made this into a storytelling experience? And then eventually video games caught up and like, what if we did a Fire Emblem? What if we did an ogre battle? What if we did a tactics ogre or a Langris or any of them? What if we just turned this stuff into essentially boiled it down into a video game form? But the time aspect, the chaos aspect, all of these things are considerations that oftentimes get kind of thrown to the side. So, for example, with something like the ogre games, typically they made a big point to try and make use of time as a mechanic. This is why, for example, in stuff like a tactics ogre, you'll see situations where units are weighed down by their equipment, or you'll see situations where units are taking their turns effectively in real time, right? Whereas in something like FFT, it was more individual based. It was more based on how fast the person was in question, less so their equipment. It was more about the skills, more about the RPG side of things. And then eventually they sort of merged back into the two Tactics Ogre remakes to kind of get the best of both worlds there. Or, you obviously have your Fire Emblems where it's just simply turn-based. And oftentimes, many games in this genre tend to eventually just go to turn-based because it's easier to manage. But again, the Ogre Battle games, as well as now this game here, as well as a few others that admittedly I'm less familiar with, but are certainly out there, created a situation where time is the biggest consideration that you need to be looking at. Then again, like right here, we ended up getting ambushed because the AI saw that there was an opportunity to take advantage of a weakened squad, and so right now we have the option to flip our people around to determine how we might deal with this cavalry. We have a few seconds left on our Griffin over there. We have assists that are not necessarily assisting that much, and we've got a team over here that, while they have options, their main attack method here is directly countered by the units in question. However, due to the fact that they have a guard up front, this is still going to be probably the most effective way of dealing with it. He might just barely survive, we'll see. But the whole point of this squad here is actually to use the archer to use the flame arrow, and then combine that in with the exploding ability from this fireball here. In order to try and detonate the entire team. However, yeah, there we go, there's the fireburst. I was going to say, I wasn't sure if I had it set up here, but again, those guys are near immune to magic, so that was a completely suboptimal setup for them. But, again, time is a consideration here. We know the tools that we have on hand, we know that we might be able to retreat somebody, we know how fatigued they are. And I should mention that this chaos mechanic, it has been explored in situations like XCOM or your Battle Brothers or things like that, where in XCOM it was the panic mechanic. In something like Battle Brothers, it was a direct fatigue mechanic, and there was a huge emphasis on making sure that you were using that kind of weight to your advantage. And here, it's less about weight and more about weighting, as it were, where units just will get tired out after a little while, and you have to find ways to deal with their logistics. And this is what makes this kind of thing so fascinating, that it's not about the numbers going up, it's about finding ways to land the tools that you know you need to land, but may not necessarily kind of see the option to do so. It's like right here we had an item to go fix the timer there, which freed up our one squad, and again, microsecond combat here, as it were. We see that these guys are feeling very confident, so they're going to be charging on forward. These guys aren't going to be able to run away from that, but it is probably worth swapping them out for a less damaged squad at the moment. And we'll go ahead and keep these guys on support, hoping that the Griffins will be a little bit closer and will be able to assist. So we'll go ahead and swap out for our Griffin squad here, and we'll see that they are very, very well equipped to deal with this situation. See, specifically when going into this map, I saw that there was a lot of units of this particular type. They are very resistant to magic, they are very good at healing themselves, and they are very good at protecting their allies. However, one thing that you do notice is that they do get tired like everybody else. Fatigue is an important mechanic, meaning that they can only do this stuff once. So, by means of going and slowing down my better attacks until later, oftentimes that will deal with their situation. In this case, the Griffin Knight was able to land it on time, but this won't necessarily be a factor for the next fight against the command squad down there, because we're getting tired out on our way over there. We probably will need to rest a few times before we get there, unless by some miracle they actually manage to get there first, now that I look at it. Alright, who are they impacting? Okay, they will be able to impact this team first. But it looks like they are managing to get a lucky hit, but they're also technically taking a few extra hits in this situation. Now, I already kind of pre-set them up for dealing with this squad. It's not necessarily a very offensive squad, but our main enemy here is the timer. We only have a few runs at these guys before time runs out, and everybody just kind of ditches the fight. So basically, let's go ahead and see how this plays out. Normally, this is one of those squads that's very hard to deal with, being one where the front guy is extraordinarily resistant to physical damage as well as arrows. So arrow supports will not help much. It'll just bounce right off. He covers the entire team. If you attack one of the side units to get rid of his support, because his main weakness is magic, if you try to attack him with magic, they cover him. If you try to attack them, he covers them, like so. However, he can only cover in one location, so area attacks will then be able to hit in the areas around. Again, the strategy here is observing what's happening and adapting accordingly. It's not necessarily that you lose your option to go give direct orders. You still get direct orders that you're going and giving out to your units. But it's these ways of getting around these different different mechanical bits and pieces, these kind of adaptations that you're doing in real time that will allow you to kind of get that same strategic feeling. And in many ways, you may have noticed I said that this was giving me similar vibes to something like Tactics Ogre Reborn. That wasn't just the usual case of I need to compare everything with Tactics Ogre Reborn. That was a case of I love this trend in strategy where it's going for trying to make this old stuff more interesting. That the randomness, instead of being like a mechanic that you're specifically rolling dice for, it's something that you have control of the dice for. You know what's going to happen, you know how it's going to happen, you know the mechanics at play, and the more you learn those mechanics and kind of broaden your horizons over how many things you can combine, the more it constantly gets those wheels spinning over like, oh, I can combine this with this, this with this, this with this. See, mobile games have kind of ruined this particular type of strategy in a way, where it's ruined the kind of thoughts in people's minds over what's potentially possible out there. Various types of mobile games that just want it to be fully automated for the purpose of just like, hey, look, local rando dumbus over here that's never played a strategy game is going to get a cookie by playing this game and pressing the button that says win. I get it, dude. I get it. That stuff is super frustrating when you hear somebody say like, oh yeah, I love strategy RPGs, and then they're just like playing some freaking cookie clicker type nonsense. And yeah, look, I hear you, but this is not that. This is the Ogre Battle formula, and the Ogre Battle formula kicks ass. So, this has not been revisited pretty much ever in the last, hell, it's literally been like 25 years. It's bizarre. It's bizarre how long it's been. So yeah, it's wild to see that happen. But the gears that are turning here are specifically the kinds of gears that are making you rethink this whole situation. Like, we get our buff here, but now this buff has similarly gone and changed this formula a little bit. Those archers are seemingly still causing an unlucky scenario, and we're not necessarily too threatened by these guys, but we still want to get through them on time. And we see that we're going to get a little bit tired, so we'll just go ahead and throw a stake out here, because this save file is more so a test save at this point. But again, we're keeping track of our stamina costs. We're keeping track of our item costs and everything else. There's a lot of little kind of meters being managed in the background. The equipment is set on these units, but the ways that they're attacking is not. And the reason that I was willing to take this attack without actually going and adapting anybody right now is because the health that was being lost seems like the amount of health that will cause one of those knights to fall in the background. I'm not 100% certain on this, but I'm fairly positive that's going to end up being the result here. And once one of those falls, that is that much less cover for these guys to go and use, which means that we're one step closer to cracking through these guys. I should probably also mention before somebody goes and leaves the big brain comment in the background, yes, you can absolutely just bring a warrior for this, as well as a pursuit, and it will help out quite a decent bit. However, that's less fun. I prefer using poison and big birds with big axes, so don't judge me. Anyway, So yeah, and as you can see, we're following up with a lot of delayed attacks to try to get past those defenses a little bit more. A little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And sometimes that's just the way you do it. It's a matter of preference and knowledge over, what exactly will be enough to get the job done, what won't be, etc. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects that go into this whole thing. It's not simply just raising the numbers up. And that time aspect. The time aspect is really the most important thing here. Because there's so many things to consider when it comes to time here. And, actually one more thing I should probably change here. Do we want to change? I think what we want to do is actually go ahead and maybe prioritize his thing. Because if we end up going and taking out his other two abilities here for the moment, we'll actually take off his other two attacks, give him specifically Cavalry Slayer, and we'll take off his shackles and we'll let him attack a little bit sooner. We'll actually go ahead and probably replace one of his moves with a counter that I have on this other... Oh, right. Right, he can't do that yet. Okay, whatever. Anyway, he'll go for the Cavalry Slayer. Ideally, I probably should have considered using Cavalry Slayer for this. Oh well, whatever. Anyway, that already improved the situation somewhat. They're getting through a little bit, probably on account of the guard from one of those units being taken down a little bit. Alright, let's see. We can take our killing chain down if we want to, though realistically... Let's see, how much is this? Grants +1 if target's defeated. We'll probably just replace our heavy slash with this. Probably just go for just lowest percentage under our conditions here, just to see if they can finish something off. More attacks is just generally going to be better in their case. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and probably prioritize cavalry is going to be fine, because there's going to be plenty of units in the background. I forgot to give her a better axe. That probably would have also been an important factor here. Anyway, let's see. It looks like she was actually getting some decent results off of that move over here. So we'll go ahead and put the heavy slash on, see what that ends up looking like. Looks like it puts it up to 3. All right, not exactly great, but let's go ahead and put it back to where it was. I think it was I think I already had it at low percentage. Whatever. Let's put it back to standard and see what it says. Like under poison slash, this still should be on whatever has the highest health. There we go, highest percentage HP, and there we go. So next we're going to move some units around, because clearly one of the issues that we're having is the fact that they're able to, that they're not currently breaking through that guy in front. So we ideally would have a warrior unit here. Again, that would just be the perfect solution there. We go ahead and we swap them out and just kind of hammer through that shield. But we want to find a way to work around that problem, dang it. So, here we are. Still doing only one. It's probably worth... let's see, if we take the ranged assist out, that helps a little bit. We also might want to just wait until our magic support is back. We'll go ahead and skip this one real quick. It's probably just because they're taking a lot of recovery, but that knight is gone. So now we have that team of 2 that's left, and it's going to be hard to crack through those guys in particular. So, in this particular case, we see that we're probably going to want to have a warrior in the team, so we'll go ahead and run them backwards real quick. Keep our archer around for a little bit of help. Actually, no, they don't need to help, because it looks like they will be able to steamroll past this guy. Perfect. The number of attacks is now overwhelming their defenses, and now we'll be able to actually just charge through and finish it. But again, I'm making a lot of predictions based off what I see in front. I'm basically trying to adapt to whatever's going on here. But this is a constantly evolving strategy, and in many ways it feels like those team building moments that you have whenever you're sitting in the menu in something like FFT or, your Fell Seals or your Tactics Ogres or anything like that. Those moments of just predicting like, well, if I go and I swap this one thing over here, maybe that'll help out over in this direction. Maybe if I go ahead and I, adjust a few things over here, but you're doing it in real time and then immediately testing it. You're testing it on the fly, you're adapting to things on the fly, and it's fun. This gives you a chance to learn your units very intimately. It gives you immediate feedback on all those changes that you're making. If you fail, great. You know what? Worst case scenario, they get sent back to base, you get their deploy point back, and you send out somebody else, you try again. And you just keep adapting and adapting and adapting and optimizing for different situations, because there is no perfect winning situation here. It's just a matter of moving stuff around, figuring out the way forward, puzzling out your way using the pieces that you understand. And it's, again, that TRPG experience, but you're constantly evolving it and evolving it and evolving it and evolving it until your squads are just kind of there. You know your units, you know their toolboxes, you know what they can accomplish. But at the same time, you know that it's not going to be the perfect setup for every situation. You know it's not going to be your end-all, be-all answer at all times for all things, and that you will need to switch people out for other situations. You know that maybe you'll want a warrior unit in that situation that we were just talking about. Maybe sometimes in a lot of the early games, somebody like Joseph here would be solid as a carry. But there's a lot of situations that he simply won't be able to carry you. And obviously, one more thing I should probably mention, this is all on expert difficulty. Honestly, if you want to experience a lot of the just a lot of the more nitty gritty of the mechanics, you want to experience more of that challenge, I would really highly recommend just trying the demo again on expert to give you an idea over why this stuff matters. Because from what I've heard, many of the folks that are getting upset may have only been trying the easier difficulties and expecting, like, well, this is no challenge, I just click on the thing and win because of story difficulty. And yeah, that's the point of story difficulty. But once you get into expert, this stuff really starts to matter. Figuring out exact timings for your attacks, kind of coordinating that timing between your different people, and then expanding that out, and you're now coordinating between your different squads, and maybe adapting people to ambushes that you didn't expect. It's this constant feeling of constant evolution, constant side grades, constant swapping, constant learning of your tools, more so than I figured out how to grind, whoopee, I won, give me a cookie, you know? Anyway, so that's about that. I hope this hopefully was helpful to at least some out there. Honestly, I have no idea. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but this is what I find cool about this system. It's time. It is the time. It is the timing aspect. It is the logistics aspect. It's this feeling of always trying to get the tools that you need to the right nuts and bolts that they need to be opening and closing, you know? I like it. Gives you that feeling of working on something. Ideally not your car, because that's honestly, like, as much as it's satisfying, it is ungodly stressful when it doesn't work out. Anyway, that's that. Y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care. And I'll see you tomorrow!